And good morning. Welcome to our Simplified Technology Training for the Public webinar. My name is Courtney Allison, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and the question moderator today. Our presenter this morning is Laura Brack, the IT Manager at the Plainfield-Guilford Township Public Library. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is provided as a part of the Library Trends and Hot Topics series. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found at our website, library.in.gov. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you have a question at any time during this webinar, just type it in the chat box on the upper left-hand side of the screen and I'll be watching. I'll get your question to Laura as soon as there's a good opportunity. And there should also be some time in the middle of the presentation as well as the end for questions. So this session is 1 hour. You'll get 1 LEU for today, and I'll be sending those out sometime in the next few weeks, along with a link to the slide deck in case you want to refer to it in the future. If at any point during this webinar you experience any technical issues, please enter your issue in the chat box. So without further ado, I will now turn the presentation over to Laura Brack.
Thanks, Courtney. Good morning, guys. This is Laura Brack. As Courtney said, I'm the IT Manager at the Plainfield-Guilford Township Public Library. A little bit about me. I am a couple things about me. I have 2 kids. I'm sorry. I'm a single mom to 2 kids. They're really hilarious, funny kids. When I'm not working, I like to garden with my boys and dabble in food preservation, do some knitting, and read and play with my kids. I started working at the Plainfield Library as a 15-year-old high school page. And then after doing that for a couple years in the Young Adult Services department, I started subbing for the same department until midway through my undergrad. I went to IUPUI, the School of Informatics, to receive my bachelor's in science in informatics, and after a couple years, returned to the Plainfield Public Library in 2007. I've been there ever since. About a year after returning, returning to the Plainfield Library, I decided to dive in and go for my MLS. And I really have found that my bachelor's in informatics and the library science degree allow me to combine the things that I love, which are technology, information seeking, and teaching, and of course, libraries. I've been able to fulfill several roles in the library at Plainfield. Of course, again, I started in Young Adult Services. We transitioned into a bigger department that includes cataloging, technical services, circulation, reference, pretty much everything. So I've gotten to do lots of those things, do circulation desk things. I've even gotten to work in the children's room at our library. I did adult programming for a while, interlibrary loan, and most recently I've done the website and just pretty much all the technology at the library. I have always been in charge of, since I returned in 2007, the technology training for the public and also for staff as we need it, and it has been quite a journey that I hope to share with you today.
So full disclosure, Laura and I used to work together at the Plainfield Library. So that was a picture of us at the bottom of that slide there.
Yes. So a couple things, now that you know a little about me, about my library. Again, I work for the Plainfield-Guilford Township Public Library. Um, we are located just west of Indianapolis. We're currently going through a rebranding, so our logo up there isn't the best quality, and it's going to change in just a couple weeks. So apologies for that. A couple things we offer, I'm sure you're familiar with a couple of these. We offer, of course, books, DVDs, magazines, and many other things. We have 58 computers for the public, free wireless, printing and scanning, fax. We do help with research, job hunting, all kinds of life skills, entrepreneurship, things like that. And one of the things that we really like to push is the help that we give as far as technology, which is what we're going to talk about today. Our library isn't really what you call a quiet library or a typical library. We like to try new things. A couple noteworthy things from our recent history, the last year or two. We were one of the first libraries in the state to plant a little free library, and we now have just over 15 of those. In 2015 to 2016, we offered STEM or STEAM or maker programming and activities for kids, particularly geared towards girls, to get them more involved in technology and show them the opportunities there. And of course, we were able to do that through an LSTA grant. With that, we actually reached just under 1,000 kids and teens in the year through those programs. And Courtney actually was a big player with me in that grant. So we did lots of programs together. So we also do a Plainfield Arts Gala. We just started circulating board games. We also just started in the last year loaning out wireless hotspots. And we have lots of outreach that we do to local daycares. And then a couple of the statistics everybody loves to see. We have a service population that's just about 30,000. We last year had 433,000 checkouts, and we have over 15,000 card holders. So the rest of those numbers you can take a look at as you want to. I won't read every single one of them, but those are things that a lot of people like about us, and I certainly like to tell people about them. Okay, before I start talking about the history of some of the computer classes and technology training offerings we've had at the Plainfield Library, I've got a couple things I thought you could think about and maybe share with me and each other in the chat box here. When did you start offering computer classes? Or if you aren't offering them, when did you start considering it? And if you are offering them, what kinds of struggles have you had? I'll point out some of the pitfalls we've had and the different things that we've tried. And hopefully you'll find some humor in some of it or be able to avoid it yourself. And then I'm also interested in hearing, and I'm sure everybody else is, what are your success stories? What are the technology classes or computer classes that you've done that have been successful and that you are proud of and would love to share with the rest of us?
Feel free, that is not on. Feel free to type those things in the chat box if you have some great stories for us. Looks like we have some people typing. So we'll wait just a second to see if we have some good stories. Okay, it looks like Karen says, people sign up but do not come to our group classes, even when we call to remind them the day prior to the class.
Yes.
We have found that one-on-one instructional sessions go well. So that's kind of what Laura is talking about. Absolutely. As well. I think we're all kind of experiencing that. We have a few more people typing. Okay, we'll go ahead and go on, and then if we have some good things in the chat box, I'll chime in here.
Those are definitely having people register and not getting the attendees that you think you're going to get. That's definitely a problem just across the board. So one of the things that I like to point out here is that we've all tried some of these things and had, things that just don't work with it, and it's okay to change. It's scary, but it's okay to change this stuff. Technology is always changing, and so it's just something we have to be ready for as well.
It looks like Deborah's saying kind of the same thing. Struggle with group classes and one-on-one tends to be better. Jackie's saying we've been offering computer classes for several years and they've been fairly successful, but it's mostly senior citizens who are taking the class over and over again.
Yes, definitely. I'll talk about this a little later, but I had one woman who took the computer class series I offered for several years in a row, every session. And I'll point out that I did the same classes multiple times a week. So she would attend the same class a couple times a week, and that's just what, that was her choice. But were there any other interesting comments you could share?
Yeah, Joseph says one-on-one sessions work well, but staff coverage is also an issue. So we might get into that a little bit later.
Absolutely, absolutely. Moving on just a little bit here, I'll talk about a little history about what I'm putting in quotes here are computer classes. And I'll mention the reason I do that is because I've had to really train myself to not think of them as computer classes anymore. That's just not what we do because they're not all computers. So just explaining why I've got that in quotes there. Before 2007, before I came back to the Plainfield Library in 2007, we were offering computer classes at the library, but through an outside company that we shared, I should say, with another public library in the area. So that company offered introductory classes as well as intermediate. They were series classes. They also had what they called computer savvy seniors, which was a longer, I think 10 class series. There was a cost for each class, or if you signed up for the computer savvy seniors, well, that's a mouthful, series, then there was a fee just for the entire series. And of course, there's some buts. The biggest one was that the staff at the library were at the mercy of the company. That's not always a bad thing, but you usually expect the company to take care of pretty much everything, and that's just not always realistic with public service without them being there. So some of the problems that we had were that, or that the staff had, I should say, when we were still offering these classes through the company, is that when the students would come in to practice outside of class time, they would often need help, as students do. And it was up to the library staff to answer questions. Because the company taught at multiple libraries, there was often confusion as to what instructors, or I should say which instructors went where, which library students were signed up at. And though the company provided the manuals, the files for the manuals, we were responsible for printing them and comb binding them. So even though we paid the company, well, we didn't pay the company, but the students paid the fee to the company, we were responsible for so much that it just wasn't really worth it anymore. So we had to use our own staff time and our own resources, and that just wasn't something that we wanted to do anymore. Also, as is pretty much unavoidable with a lot of the more formal computer classes in a library setting, there were so many prerequisites it just made it nearly impossible for anybody to fit what was being asked of them. There were just too many rules. For example, if someone wanted to sign up for anything except for the very first introduction to computers class, they had to have some skills. They had to have the skills, how to use a mouse, for example. They had to know how to move around in Windows, what the start button was. And of course, you would assume that people would learn that in the first class, or that they would want to come to the first class. But let's be real, we all know that people want to skip that first one, or they're not going to show up, and then they'll come to the second one and ask you to fill them in on what they missed out on. So feel free to share those stories. I know we all have them. And it's nice to be able to laugh about them after the frustration is over with. But another big problem was that the classes were just too long. These classes were 3 hours. So I think they had one that went from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., which meant several people were hungry. Then there was another that was 5 to 8, which meant it was running right up to when the library closed. So the class sessions were long enough that it just wasn't really great for the library atmosphere. So it was too much of a commitment for people. And even though they were paying the money, the commitment wasn't really, it just wasn't a big enough commitment for them. They just didn't care. So, of course, you have people that are sick or just don't feel like getting out in whatever the weather is, so they just don't come in. So really, the classes were okay. They served the need, which was to teach people in our community how to use computers, some basic skills here, but they just weren't good enough anymore. A little bit more after 2007, I came on staff again, and the adult program asked me to develop some introductory computer classes. They wanted me to replace what the company had been doing, and the hope was that, of course, it would save us some money because it would be done in-house, and also we hoped to be able to offer it for free. At the time, the director that we had really liked the free stuff. She didn't want us to charge for anything. So I tried a series of 4 introductory classes, just really kind of followed the same format that the company had been doing. And I also tried, along with that, a series of a 4-week series called Seniors Helping Seniors, where I thought this was just a good way to kind of build a partnership or expand on a partnership. We had local seniors, seniors from the local high school, I should say, come in and help senior citizens through a computer class. So I would instruct at the front of the room, and each senior had a senior to help them. So this built some really great relationships. It's always great to see younger people and older people teaching each other things from both sides there. And each of the volunteers, they were able to take the experience they gained at the library with them to whatever they were doing, getting another job or moving on to college, and they all found that to be really helpful. So one of the things that I tried to do was make the classes shorter. The director pointed out that even just taking an hour off, cutting it down to 2 hours would help, and it really did. I also took advantage of a couple volunteers that would help when stand at the back of the classroom and help when people were struggling. Of course, there's some buts. There always are. The volunteers weren't always reliable. Sometimes they just wouldn't show up. And it's, when you count on that, it makes it kind of difficult. So we also had a cost. I'll get into the cost per class after. There was a cost to us for the supplies. We had a booklet, a registration, a booklet that they got upon registration that they would use during the class. Again, we wanted the class to be free, but that cost started kind of climbing there. We thought it would be a money saver, so I used Publisher to create, I think it was a 15 to 20 page booklet, depending on the class. We found, though, that the lack of payment made people feel, again, like there wasn't an obligation. So since they were getting this, 20-page booklet for free, if they didn't feel like coming to the class that day, they already had the booklet, so they didn't. So let's see, registration, another thing. I think we've already talked a little bit about this, but the registration list was always full. I would do, I think, a morning session and an evening session once a week, and this was every other month. So it ended up being 8 sessions per month, every other month. The registration, we allowed for 10 people. We had 10 computers. It was full. The wait list was usually 5 to 10 people, and inevitably we had no-shows. And then people on the wait list who would come and hope to fill an empty seat if somebody didn't show up, and then people who would show up late and want their seat back, and it's just hard to police all of those kinds of things. So In fact, at times, I had one woman that this happened multiple times with her. She showed up 30 minutes late, and then at one point she asked to leave 60 minutes early. So I thought she only committed about 30 minutes to that. I also had another woman sign up for the spot, and she came in and sat at the computer in the back and wrote thank you cards for something the whole time. So she didn't really get very much out of that either, and unfortunately whoever was waitlisted missed out on that. So another thing that I found with these kind of classroom setting computer classes is that there's always that one person. There's always a know-it-all, or the opposite, unfortunately, somebody who just isn't getting some of the basic concepts. One of my favorite stories that I like to tell beginning computer users when they seem frustrated or like they're lacking the confidence is that one of the people that I enjoyed teaching the most when I very first said, okay, use your mouse to click here on the screen. He physically picked the mouse up and touched it to the computer screen. And I didn't explain it to him yet, so that was my mistake. And but there's sometimes we have people that we have to just spend the whole time with, and then the other end of that spectrum, we have someone who already knows it all. They're just taking the class so that they can help you teach it, I guess. So those are a couple things that I dealt with, and it was just so frustrating. Let's see. So there's still a cost and time that we had to take to prep. There was a cost to the students, and of course we still had prerequisites in order to keep some of those one people, I guess, or the one person at bay. We just still had to put those prerequisites in here. If you were going to take the Word class, you really had to know how to use a mouse. So in some ways I found that we were kind of backtracking. There's still too many rules, ifs, ands, buts. So again, this was okay. The solution was okay, but it just still wasn't good enough. Towards the end of this time, I think it was 2012, we noticed that registration and attendance for the introductory classes was really waning. It was just tapering off. This is when we realized that the classes just weren't meeting the technology training needs of our community. Around this time, I also had to take some leave, and so I wasn't able to teach the classes. I was the only person in the library that taught the computer classes. Luckily, I found one of our coworkers, Tim, he started teaching the classes in my absence while I was out having a baby. But that was another thing that kind of stuck out to me that, this just doesn't really work. If I am sick, if I need to stay home, if I have something that comes up, and there's a class scheduled, what do we do? So that was something else that was a sore thumb kind of thing. What this made, or led me to was opening up what I call the Technology Training Needs Log. Really, that fancy name just meant that it was a piece of paper sitting at the desk where we took down information for people who were interested in technology training, whatever kinds of technology they needed. When Windows 8 rolled out, we had a big influx of people who needed to learn it, or wanted to learn it, I should say. People were buying new computers, and of course they had Windows 8 on them, but our public computers still had 7, and they still do have 7. Our staff wasn't familiar with Windows 8. If you're familiar with it or have seen it, it either works for you or it just doesn't. It's very different from Windows 7. So some people had a really hard time getting used to that. So our staff, again, wasn't familiar with 8. I wasn't super familiar with 8 because I was using Windows 7 at home and at work. And we weren't planning on upgrading our public computers anytime soon. So this was also around the time that I was completing my MLS and having another baby. So my time was getting just stretched more thinly. We decreased the frequency of the computer classes, and at the desk when people would come to ask about the computer classes, we would just explain We offered them twice a year at this point. We asked what they specifically were looking for, and we would write that down in the log as well as their phone number. And then we'd let them know that, if we had enough interest in something, we would try to offer a class in it. So it usually made people feel a little bit better, but it also felt to me like an empty promise. I felt a lot of pressure to offer some of the classes, so I kind of felt like it was a blessing and a curse. One of the issues was that some of the people who were expressing interest in training needs thought that they were signing up for a class. So when we did, well, I'll give one example. We had one woman, I'll refer to her a couple times in this presentation, so I'm going to call her Roberta. She came in, she came in several times and would ask, are you having computer classes yet? And we told her each time, they're twice a year in the spring and in the fall. We took her information down. But when it came time to register for the classes, she didn't register in time, and it filled up, unfortunately. So she was pretty frustrated. She thought that she had signed up for it. And the thing about Roberta is that her husband, she was older. I think she was in her 80s maybe. Her husband had passed away just a couple months prior. And she told us her husband took care of all of the finances, the bill paying, online bills, the bank accounts, everything, updating license plates, everything like that. She didn't do those things. He passed away unexpectedly, and she was just lost. I mean, you're lost when you have something like that anyway. And here she was struggling to pay bills and do things like that simply because she didn't have the skills. She came to the library, where people do when they need help with things, and I kind of felt like we failed her because she thought she was signed up and she just wasn't. So unfortunately, she was a little disappointed. So that was just kind of a sore point there for us, but the story gets better. So hang in there with me just here for a moment. I did find out through this training log some good news and some overwhelming news. What do they need and what do they want? There were lots of things. They wanted classes on Career Builder, Facebook, Goodreads. They wanted to learn how to use their Nooks or their Kindles, iPads. They wanted to learn Excel. They wanted to learn advanced Excel without having used a computer before. They wanted to learn Pinterest, what it was, how to use it, why people were using it. Of course, they wanted to learn how to use our catalog. They wanted to learn Windows 8. We've talked a little bit about that. When it came out, it was just such a difficult thing for people. They wanted to learn how to write a resume. They wanted you to write the resume for them. They wanted to learn how to use Photoshop. They wanted us to have Photoshop on all of our computers, or they just wanted to learn how to use a digital camera. They wanted to learn, again, Apple products, iPads, getting apps and things on there. They wanted to learn about safety, and they wanted to learn about the services that we offer for their devices and their computers, Overdrive. So not such a difficult thing there. What is it that they needed? They just wanted to learn their own things. That's all. They want to learn their own stuff on their own terms, on their own time. They didn't want to sign up for a class. They didn't want to have to show up at 9 a.m. if they didn't feel like it. They didn't want to have to pay for it. They didn't want to stay if they didn't feel like staying. They don't want to touch your computer if they can use their own. They were stressed, and I was stressed. So a couple things before we move into where the story starts getting a little better here. Some things I want you to think about, and feel free to share again with us in the chat box here. How often have you had someone come up to the desk and say, hey, I'm really excited. My kids got me this e-reader, but I don't know how to use it. Can you help me? And of course, the kid doesn't want to help them, huh? How many of you cringe when someone in the library, your director or a service manager says, we're getting this new technology, this new database, or this new service, and we're so excited to teach it to you? Ugh. makes so many of us cringe because we think, oh, great, I have to learn it, and then I have to learn it well enough to teach somebody else. How many of you have coworkers who just aren't as tech savvy, or maybe you're one of them, and that's okay. We all have skills. And it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to know that maybe you or a coworker might get questions that are just a little over your head because they're coming in more and more every day. Someone wants you to reset a password, and where do you even begin? So these are a couple things that we've been able to kind of make better at our library. So do you have any stories about this you'd like to share? If so, feel free to share with us in the chat box here.
Yeah, Brenda's saying January is the new toy month. Christmas presents for over 70 parents. So technology step up for staff.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to dive right in actually and kind of get ahead of the game, but it's because you mentioned that when we first started using Overdrive, within the year we offered like what do we call it, an e-reader petting zoo, I believe. And that's one of the things that honestly kind of opened the floodgates to the solution we've come up with here, the digital drop-in. We allowed people to just come in and touch an e-reader and look at it. We talked to them about it, and that openness where there's no expectation was really nice. So it kind of helps with that awful, even December when people are coming in, I want to buy this. What do you suggest? I don't know. I need suggestions too.
Yep, Jackie's saying the same thing. The beginning of the year contains our largest amount of classes because of those lovely Christmas gifts. Yes.
That makes sense. So this just led us to rethinking our customers' needs. It's really hard to start from scratch with computer training. For example, I was just talking to a coworker yesterday in preparation for today. When I would do those booklets for the introductory computer series, I had a picture of the hourglass, for example, when it used to turn over and over when your computer was thinking or busy. And I can't tell you how long it took me to change just that symbol in the booklet to the circle symbol it changed to how many years ago? I mean, and that's part of the thing is, technology changes so much. And it's not just changing for our customers, our patrons, it's changing for us too. So it's not just a matter of being able to teach it, but keeping up with the resources that we have, making sure that they're accurate. It's so difficult. So the training log, again, it was kind of a sore spot for me, but also opened up, so many ideas. We started thinking about the variety of devices. People would come in and ask for, the beginning computer classes, but on Windows 8. Or, well, do you have it for a tablet? Do you have a beginning iPad class? Or, well, I know the basics with my iPad, but I'd like to learn how to do some things, or my jailbroken phone, things like that. I mean, the questions we got or I should say the requests for classes that we got were so varied. So I tried it. I tried a Facebook class, a Pinterest class. I tried, let's see, I think we tried, Pinterest. We did not digital photography, but using things like GIMP and other free image resources on the internet. We even did building or creating a holiday newsletter in Publisher. We tried all different things. We tried all different kinds of things, and we had attendance, but we didn't always have the attendance we hoped. For every 5 people that would come in and say, do you have a Facebook class? We'd have 1 come in, and they'd come in with specific questions. How do I block this person? How do I change my profile picture? Which of these pictures looks better? It's so hard to think up a lesson plan when you just can't anticipate what people are going to want. On the same vein there, we kind of talked about this earlier, not everybody wants a class. They don't want to do this on your time. They want to do it on their time. They want to show up late. They want to leave early. And that's just how it is. So also, everybody has different needs, and they just aren't always tech related. We'll talk about Roberta and her situation here in just a minute. And there's different levels of know-how, not just for your customers, the beginning people who still use the mouse incorrectly, to the more advanced users who want to learn how to do Excel formulas. You also have staff with different things they know and skills. So it's a lot of things to think about. Our solution was the digital drop-in. We're coming up on, I think, let's see, just in this next month here, we will have done, I think we will have served a couple hundred people. I've got that later on. We'll talk about numbers here in just a little bit. But we've been really counting our successes with this lately. So every Monday, what it is every Monday from 4 to 6, we open up our lobby conference room, which is just right off of our front door, and we invite people to bring us all of their technology troubles. It sounds awful, doesn't it? It's really not. It's really not. And let me tell you, there's so many reasons why. Anyhow, so we invite people to come in with any technology questions they have. They can come in anytime between 4 and 6. They can stay as long as they want between 4 and 6, and we will give them all the attention we can. Backing up just a little bit, I changed positions or some responsibilities a couple years ago, around the same time that we were making the changes or considering making these computer class changes. And one of the things that we did at the time was we developed what we called the technology team, excuse me. And it was a group of people, Courtney and myself included, about 5 of us staff members who could, we knew passwords and tips and tricks for technology within the library, but it also kind of stretched over to the drop-in. So when we started the drop-in, the idea was that one of us on the technology team would be present each Monday, and then another staff member or 2 as available.
I'll chime in here just a second to talk about the technology team since I was on it.
Please.
It was really great. It wasn't, the 5 people in the library who knew how to do all the stuff. It was really just 5 people in the library who were interested in technology, and if you had a question or needed to figure something out, we would put that effort in to try to figure it out. So kind of this slide where it says different levels of know-how, if you do these kind of digital drop-ins or digital help, you don't have to be the be-all end-all of technology information in your library.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that I think has made it so great. With the technology team, like Courtney said, it was a group of people who wanted to do this, and who wanted to. It wasn't just born from the digital drop-in. These weren't directly related originally, but when we developed the technology team, the idea was that I had just become the IT manager, and to be honest, I didn't feel very confident, and so I was just looking for help from people who had some skills that I might not have, or who just wanted to help. And we ended up doing a lot of brainstorming, and that's where we came up with the digital drop-in. So in the beginning, every Monday, myself and usually another person on the tech team, and sometimes someone that wasn't on the tech team, would show up in the lobby conference room, and we would wait. I think the first day that we had it, we had 7 people, if I remember correctly. I think it was myself, and were you at the first one? For some reason, I feel like so, you were. Yeah. Courtney and I and another tech team member, I believe. So we had pretty much one-on-one help. The first day went so smoothly, we just thought this is going to be perfect. So let me tell you a couple stories that kind of relate here. First of all, we've seen all kinds of devices. We talked about how there's a variety of devices. People have they have laptops they want to learn how to use, and tablets, right? They also have ancient answering machines, digital cameras from 20 years ago, routers. We've had someone bring in what was it? A full size, well, not commercial, of course, for their house, all in one printer. He was lugging that heavy thing in.
Someone's asking, did you have people bring in desktop computers to fix?
We have had, I think I was gone 1 week, but I heard that a guy did. We have people call and ask that sometimes. I'm trying to think of some of the more unique items we've had. We've had things that aren't even really technology. Excuse me for just a minute. We've also had people come in with nothing on hand, but just to kind of sit. So, one older woman. This is one of my favorite stories. One older woman wanted to get on Facebook to see her kids and grandkids. So this was one of the people who, of course, asked us, "Do you have a Facebook class?" She got on. One of our not so tech savvy people, our PR manager, helped with this woman because she does know Facebook pretty well. She got the older woman, set up with a Facebook account. She was able to check on her family, see pictures, share things. She was very concerned about privacy and was at a very beginner level. But our coworker, she didn't need the whole Facebook experience. So our coworker kind of figured out what her needs were, just the very basic needs for a profile, and got her in touch with her family. And it was just simple. And this was one of those situations where, because the class is, well, it's not a class, is it? Because the drop-in is so informal, there are moments where nobody's there. And I think in this situation, my coworker had come in to talk to me about some work things, and she loves Facebook. She's involved with our library's Facebook, and she ran with that one, and she's still very proud of that. Another similar story is we have one very well-known patron who comes in several times a week to get books and DVDs. She has very long hair. She's quite a character, very interesting. When she found out about the digital drop-in, she brought in her tablet. It was kind of an older one. It doesn't work unless it's plugged in with tape on it, one of those kind of deals. Anyhow, she came in, brought her tablet, asked us to get her started with her Facebook. Well, what she meant was she already had an account. She couldn't remember the email associated with it or the password, or if she used her maiden name or one of her other married names. She'd had a couple married names. We got her set up. It took some detective work, but we got it figured out. We found she did already have an account, and she just didn't know what to do next. And within an hour, I just love this. Within an hour, she was messaging, with a cousin she told us she hadn't seen or heard from in over 20 years. So very, very nice.
So Brenda asked, do you have a procedure for what you will do and will not do for staff that help?
That's a really good question. I'll get into that just a little bit here in